Hello, travelers and monster catchers abound. I'm Stella Ferris, and you've crash landed on the Monster Catchers Journal podcast. Today's episode is about a cosmic storm that almost wiped out all of Nibiru. It was an autumn day, as you earthlings call it. I was sitting on my porch enjoying a nice cup of glow tea. Zena was curled up in a chair next to me with her Ignazura sprawled across her lap, while Luna and Meerno were running around the yard chasing the swellketh. The swellketh bird is a bird that can puff itself out like a pufferfish to keep prey from being able to eat it. I heard the rumble, but I paid no mind to it, as thunderstorms are common on Nibiru. However, I started to worry as it got darker and darker. Come on, we must get to Luan. Professor Orion always tells me if a cosmic storm kicks up, go to Luan because it's the only safe place on Nibiru during a cosmic storm. I shouted as Zena and Luna and our three Glyphs, Aurabeak, Ignazura, and Meerno, ran for Luan Academy. The whole town had gathered in the academy, chattering and speaking amongst themselves about what might be happening. Professor Orion, what's going on? I asked as I walked into his classroom. A cosmic storm has kicked up over Nibiru, with gale force winds strong enough to take out all of Nibiru. But terraformia may never be the same. But don't worry, as I've said before, Luan is the safest place on Nibiru, Professor Orion said. I found a spot in Professor Orion's classroom and sat with my back to the corner. I've never been much for having my back exposed to an exit. It just leaves you open for attacks. Luna and Zena sauntered over and sat next to me. A few moments later, my worst nightmare arrived. Nova. What have you done this time, Quasar? Did you catch a time glyph and that's what's causing this cosmic storm? Nova asked in a sarcastic tone. No, I've got nothing to do with this, I replied. Well, that's a first, Nova said as she laughed hysterically. Can you shove off, you pecta? I shouted. Language, Quasar, Orion said from his usual spot at his maps. I was surprised he'd even heard me. Normally when he was pored over his maps and books, he was super focused and didn't hear a word anyone was saying. He had to pick this of all times to hear me, right? Anyways, Nova smirked and said, yeah, what Orion said. Language, Quasar. Is there an echo? Because there seems to be a mockingbird in my class, and those do not exist here on Nibiru. We shall keep it that way, Professor Orion said as he went back to his work. I smirked at this, and Nova just gave me a funny look. How long are we going to be here? I asked. Without even looking up from his maps and books, Orion replied, could be days, could be months. Storms like these don't just pass. And with that there was a long bit of silence, aside from the chatter and the constant thumping from the storm outside. Hey, let's play float chess, I suggested, trying to make my voice sound like it belonged to someone who wasn't watching the windows turn into a black glass. Zena and Luna brightened like lanterns. Ignazura tucked deeper into Zena's arm, and Meerno did a ridiculous little hop that scattered dust motes into the air. Aurabeak, always too dignified for games, cocked his head and landed on the nearest windowsill, feathers ruffling as the gale made the panes sing. For a few heartbeats, the room smelt like warm tea and old books again, and the idea of anything else felt impossible. The chessboard appeared between us, not a board of wood, but a field of pulsing light. Each piece of glyph stitched figurine that hovered an inch above the table. Zena's rook drifted. Ignazura's knight filed through a diagonal with effortless grace. Luna's queen made a showy flourish that sent a ripple through the pieces. We moved in silence at first, the tiny game a secret rebellion against the thunder outside. Then the air hiccuped. A low, wrong note vibrated through the academy. The light in the chess pieces flickered and rewound like a scratched crystal. Metal clocks on the wall skipped backward, then thudded forward, hard enough to make the hands quake. Someone stifled a cry. Even Professor Orion's maps quivered as though afraid. Nova's laugh cut thin. "There it is, the rhythm of the time glyph," she said. But this time her voice had teeth. It isn't just weather, it's folding. She pushed through the crowd toward the front table, where Orion stood, maps spread like a war plan. He looked up, and for the first time the lines around his eyes didn't belong to the maps, but to worry. Luan sits on a weak seam of the nexus, Orion said, voice steady but urgent. When a time glyph stutters, it finds seams to latch onto. The Academy's word will hold for a while, but if the glyph's pulse keeps shifting, if it accelerates, terraformia won't be the only thing that changes. We could lose whole memories. People might slip out of the record. He tapped a star on one of his maps, and the ink around it shimmered like heat haze. Nova's smirk had vanished. "So, what do we do, map man? Sit here and let the storm eat everything we like?" Her fingers were balled into her sleeves. For a heartbeat, I thought she would shudder. For a heartbeat, I thought she would shoulder Orion aside and go after the glyph herself, the way she always wanted to fix things with force. Orion folded his hands. We stabilized the pulse, anchored the rhythm. There are old Luan rites. They bind temporal drift into the living things. Glyphs can act as conductors. If we hum the right sequence and center the glyph's waveform. But it's dangerous. It requires someone to stand in the seam and hold focus while the rest of us chant. The seam pulls at you. It reaches for what you hold dear. The room inhaled. Luna's fingers found mine and squeezed. Zena's face was alabaster. Meerno gave a tiny, worried chirp. Ignazura's sapphire eyes shone like lanterns. Nova's drawl worked. "I don't like sacrificing people, Professor. You won't necessarily be alone." Orion's gaze flicked to the three of us. To me, to Zena, to Luna. Glyph bonded hosts are stronger together. If two or three stand in the seam and lock minds, they can steady it long enough for a tracer to thread the glyph and calm its pulse. My chest felt like a drum. The storm's thump outside matched it. I looked at my friends, at Zena, whose laugh could make even Orion grin, at Luna, whose hands never stopped moving when she was nervous, at Aurabeak, who had pecked me awake more times than I could count. I thought of the swelketh bird puffing itself into safety in our yard, and of glow tea cooling on the porch, small stubborn proofs that our world had been here long before anyone named it safe. "I'll do it," I said before I could talk myself out of it. My voice was quieter than I wanted, but steady. "Put me in the seam, I'll hold." Nova's eyes cut to me like knives and then unexpectedly softened. "You always pick the dramatic option, Quasar," she inhaled, then squared her shoulders. "Fine, but if you're going to stand there like some tragic statue, I'm not letting you do it alone." Luna's lamps dimmed as the wind reared up again. Outside, something bright and cold streaked across the sky, an aureole scar that painted the clouds in silver. Professor Orion shoved a bundle of thin copper rods against the table. "Tracers. We hum, we hold, we thread," he said. "When I give the signal, we start. Keep your mind on one thing. One unmovable truth. Your anchor. The storm will try to pry it away from you." I closed my eyes and pictured the porch, my cup of glow tea warm between my hands. I pictured Zena and Luna laughing on the steps, Ignazura's purr, Meerno's ridiculous hop. I breathed in Luan's old wood smell. felt Aurabeak's feathered warmth against my palm. Outside, the world seemed like a beast. Inside, my little anchor burned steady, and for the first time since the rumble began, I felt ready. Professor Orion raised his hand, and the room fell into a silence so deep I could hear the scratch of chalk dust sliding down the blackboard. The storm pressed against the walls like an angry ocean, but inside, every eye was on him. "Now," he whispered. The tracers lit up in our palms, copper glowing as though molten, and a low hum spread through the chamber. It wasn't a song exactly, it was a little older than that, a vibration that felt like it had been waiting in the bones of Luan Academy since before the first brick was laid. "Now," Nova stepped beside me, jaw clenched. "Don't you dare falter," she muttered, her voice tight. "Don't you dare mock me if I do." I shot back, and for once she didn't smirk. The floor trembled, a seam tore open in the air, like paper splitting in storms, light bled through, a jagged wound of violet and silver. My chest lurched, as though something inside me recognized it, a pull, sharp and hungry. I gripped the tracer tighter. Aurabeak flared his wings, Ignazura's sapphire body glowed, Meerno bristled like a living wall. They were anchoring us, their presences stretching out like roots into the seam. Luna's voice joined Orion's hum, soft but clear, and Zena followed, a heartbeat later. The seam widened. Time itself stuttered. Luna's hand squeezed mine, then blinked away, then returned as though the moment had rewound. Nova cursed under her breath but steadied her own tracer into the light. The glyph appeared. Not a beast, not a shadow, just a shimmer. A pulse made flesh, shaped like a ripple in water. It had no eyes, yet I felt it looking at us, through us. It was the storm, the fold, the beat of the clocks breaking. "Anchor," Orion's voice cut sharp. I shut my eyes and latched onto my truth. The porch, the glow tea, laughter in the yard. The memory burned bright, fighting the pull. But the glyph wasn't content. It reached, clawing at my anchor, tugging at pieces of me I didn't realize were loose. Nova's hum wavered. She grit her teeth, shoulders trembling, and I felt her anchor falter. I shifted, letting my voice join the hum, steady and low. "Hold on, Nova. Don't let it take it." She snapped her eyes to mine, and for the first time I saw fear instead of sarcasm. "Easier said than," she cut off, voice choked, as the seam yanked at her with invisible hands. Zena shouted over the roar, "We have to thread it, now, or we will lose her." Orion's eyes blazed, and he slammed his own tracer into the air. "Then thread it." The glyph pulsed harder, and the seam yawned wide enough the stars bled through. Not Nibiru stars, but cold, unfamiliar constellations. I raised my tracer into the rift. The storm howled louder, and my anchor slipped like sand between fingers. Then I felt another hand on mine, warm, steady, Luna's. Her eyes locked with mine, glowing with something fiercer than fear. "Together," she whispered. The hum rose, and then the seam screamed, and then the tracer caught. The glyph twisted, shuddered, and folded in on itself like a collapsing wave. The seam snapped shut with a thunderous crack that shook the academy. Silence fell, real silence. The kind that hummed in your ears because the storm had truly stopped. Nova staggered, breath hard, and labored. "Well," she rasped. "That was horrifying." Zena laughed weakly, hugging Ignazura so tight the poor glyph squealed. Luna's hand was still on mine, and I realized I hadn't let go. Professor Orion lowered his map, his expression unreadable. "You've steadied the pulse for now," his eyes flickered to me, but the glyph was not destroyed, only lulled. It will return stronger. Nova straightened, brushing dust off her sleeves. "The next time," she said, her smirk returning like a mask, "we don't just anchor it, we cage it." I swallowed hard, staring at the still glowing tracer in my hand. I wasn't sure if she was right, but I knew one thing, Nibiru would never be the same. When we finally pushed the academy doors open, the air outside was damp and heavy, but blessedly still. The storm had passed, leaving the world drenched and glistening. Moonlight and sunlight filled the courtyard and the stone pass, where puddles had gathered like scattered mirrors. Zena stepped out first, Ignazura perched proudly on her shoulder, his sapphire stripes catching the glow of the lamps. She tapped her foot against the puddle and gave a mischievous grin. Splash! Luna didn't hesitate. She darted forward, skirts swishing, and stomped into the nearest puddle with a laugh that rang brighter than any storm could silence. Meerno bounded after her, sending up a spray of water that showered both of them. I couldn't help it. I laughed too. The weight of the seam, the echo of the glyph, all of it cracked and fell away like broken glass. My feet carried me forward, and I leaped into the biggest puddle I could find, sending water fanning out in every direction. Aurabeak let out an indignant squawk, as droplets rained over his feathers, but I swear I caught him ruffling his wings like he was enjoying it. Even Nova had been sulking near the steps, finally gave in. She rolled her eyes, muttered something under her breath, and then stomped hard. Her puddle sent a spray high enough to soak my shoulder. "Really?" I sputtered. She smirked. "Consider it payback, Quasar." We danced like that for what felt like hours, boots splashing, water glistening under the moonlight and the sunlight, laughter echoing through Luan's courtyard. For one night, the world wasn't about storms, seams, or glyphs. It was about puddles, friends, and the stubborn joy of being alive after everything tried to take it away. And I think, just maybe, Nibiru itself was laughing with us. The morning after felt like waking from a half-remembered dream. The sky over Nibiru was clear, painted with streaks of soft orange and violet. Dew clung to the academy gardens, and every puddle from the night before shimmered like glass bowls filled with starlight. We thought maybe, just maybe, the worst was over, but Professor Orion summoned us to his classroom before breakfast. His expression grave. His maps had changed overnight. Where neat lines once traced rivers and coastlines, there were now warped spirals and jagged rifts etched across them, as though something had dragged its claws through the very world. This was no storm of chance, he said, tapping one of the spirals. The glyph behind it revealed itself in a pattern left behind. I leaned closer. The marks weren't just spirals. They resembled a curling stinger. Orion's voice dropped low, almost reverent. "His name is Skeliwave." Zena frowned, pulling Ignazura closer against her chest. "Never heard of him." "You wouldn't have," Orion replied, eyes still on the map. "He is one of the uncatchables, a skeleton scorpion, his body woven from bones of drowned creatures, his skin nothing but flowing water. He drags the sea with him wherever he goes, and storms follow in his wake. He is neither alive nor dead, he simply endures." Luna shifted uneasily. Meerno pressed against her legs with a nervous growl. "So he caused all that just by existing?" "Existing," Orion said softly, "and stirring. If Skeliwave moves, the tides of Nibiru move with him. The storm was only a symptom. If he fully awakens, we may see floods that swallow whole valleys." Nova's arms crossed, scoffed, but her voice held no humor. "Another uncatchable, perfect. Just how many nightmares are out there waiting for us to trip over them?" I stared at the storm, marked my maps, my tracer still faintly glowing at my side. The storm had been terrifying enough, but the thought of a skeleton scorpion made of living water, somewhere out there beneath the waves, it sent a chill colder than any rain down my spine. "Skeliwave," I whispered, testing the name. It tasted like salt and thunder. If he's uncatchable, then what are we supposed to do?" I asked. Orion finally looked at me, his expression unreadable. "Hope," he said. "Hope he does not arise again." But deep down, I wasn't sure hope would be enough. What is Hope going to do? Nova snapped, pushing off the wall where she's been leaning. Storms don't stop because you wish they would. Skeliwave doesn't care about your maps or our prayers. He'll rise again, and when he does, puddle dancing won't save us. Her words landed heavy. Even Ignazura hissed, tail lashing, while Meerno tucked himself under Luna's chair with a low whine. Professor Orion didn't flinch. He set down his chalk, finally lifting his eyes to meet Nova's glare. Hope isn't the weapon, Nova. It's the anchor. Without it, you'll drown, before Skeliwave ever touches you. She scoffed. Poetic, but drowning's drowning. Anchor or not. I found myself speaking before I even thought about it. No, he's right. Hope kept us steady in the seam last night. Without it, he would have been shredded like paper. Hope doesn't stop the storm, but it's the only reason we can stand long enough to fight it. Nova froze at that. Her smirk faltered. For a second I thought she might actually agree with me. Instead, she looked away, muttered, "We'll see." Orion's gaze softened, but his tone stayed firm. Skeliwave is beyond capture, but not beyond observation. If he surfaces again, we must be ready, not to cage him, but to learn. Knowledge is the first shield. Zena finally broke the silence, her voice quieter than usual. And if knowledge isn't enough? The professor's eyes darkened. Then, my dear, we make sure Hope doesn't leave us, even when everything else does. And with that, guys, this is another episode of the Monster Caster's Journal. I hope you have enjoyed, and may the lights and the stars and the gods of Nibiru shine their beautiful light down on you. I will see you next time.